Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're a minute away from the start. I'm seeing people click on. So welcome to the Garden Coach. I'm Jennifer Brennan, and I've got some cool samples today, and we've got some great questions. And I'm here to kind of keep you up to date on what you should be doing in your garden and what we're seeing here in the Plant Information Center. And we're seeing tons and tons and tons. So I'm seeing people logging on. Welcome, welcome. Isn't it a beautiful day out there today? Wow. And we've had a little bit of rain, which we really need. And we really need. And I'm always so grateful that we're up here by the lake because we get that wonderful advantage of being cooler by the lake. Whenever my dad was always cute, whenever I would talk to him, he would always bring up the fact that, well, you're always cooler by the lake, Jen. So it's a real advantage that we have, I think. Well, let me see. It's 1 o'clock. So now we're going to officially start. I'm Jennifer Brennan. And this is the garden coach session. We've been doing these every week, and I start out with the points that you should be aware of, this exact week. And one of the very first ones, and I guess it's really bad to start with bad news, but it's warning, 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 warning. Last week, I predicted that we would probably be seeing the Japanese beetles within the next 2 to 3 weeks. Well, guess what? I get a newsletter, and it's the Chicagoland Golf Course Superintendent's newsletter, and it's a research center. All the golf courses pay into this organization, and they do all the research for all the golf courses in the area. And man, it is incredible research. They're based in Lamont, Illinois. So they're about 5 days to 10 days ahead of us here on the lakeshore on things that they're seeing, diseases and insects and things like that. Well, over the weekend, I downloaded my newsletter, and they predicted, based on the emergence of the Japanese beetles downstate, that we would be seeing them here in the Chicagoland area on the 23rd and the 24th. That was 2 days ago and yesterday. Now, we haven't seen any samples at the plant healthcare clinic or the information clinic, not yet. So I think we're about a week behind, but they have had them out in Lamont. So I am one of those people that I dislike Japanese beetles so much. I was first exposed to them myself when I was an intern, and that was a long time ago. I was an intern, and I was a student at the University of Illinois, and I got a summer internship at Longwood Gardens. And it was a 10-week program in the summer, and there were 8 different areas, 8 different gardens that we could intern in. And guess what I did? I got lucky, right? And ended up in the rose garden 2 of those weeks. And back then, Japanese beetles were horrendous out there. This was in Philadelphia, and they were just horrible. And whenever they would spray, back then, we would have to wear hazmat suits, and they would do a spray, and then for the rest of the whole week, we interns, and you know what intern, the other name for intern is a slave. We interns went out and did the dirty chores that nobody else, none of the paid employees in the garden wanted to do. So what we would have to do is we'd have to pick off the Japanese beetles off of the roses. They had a beautiful, and they still have a beautiful rose garden, and we would have to pick all those Japanese beetles up. And back then, everyone wasn't doing earth-friendly natural stuff. We had buckets of kerosene that we would throw them in, and it would drown them immediately. But that wasn't the safest thing to be working with, I don't think. Well, now I know. But anyway, so here we have really effective insecticides that can be used in an earth-friendly natural way. And for the roses, it's going to be a little late. It's going to be a little late to use the soil drench. And I've always talked about these wonderful products that you mix. And this is the all-in-one rose and flower care from the Bio Advanced company, formerly known as Bayer Advanced. And I love this because It's easy. You shake this up, measure 2 ounces, and see it has this handy measuring cup. See the markings on it? Measure 2 ounces. It goes in a quart of water, and you pour it right at the base of the rose. Now it takes 5 days, and then the insecticide that's in here, the fungicide, and the fertilizer is taken up to the tips of the leaves. You might still have time to do this, but once the Japanese beetles are there and they're feeding on the plant, you want to use a contact spray so you can kill them on contact. And then this is also a wonderful systemic. And this is the 3-in-1 from BioAdvanced, and it's the insecticide, fungicide, or insect disease and mite control. And spray these, it's a translaminar systemic, which means you spray one surface of the leaf and it's pulled through all of the cells of the leaf. I love this because you can use this at dusk when all the pollinators are back at their hives. Oh, and did you know this is pollinator week? This is pollinator week. So I should have started out with that. But anyway, use it at dusk and then spray it when all the pollinators are back at their hives or, hiding in their shrubs like the butterflies do. And then it dries by the next morning when the sun comes out and pollinators are back out again. It won't affect them at all. It only affects things that are eating the leaves of the roses. And then the only way you'll see Japanese beetles is the only way I love to see them, dead on the ground. So now's the time to do that. To make sure that you take care of that problem, because the adults they'll be around for a good 4 to 6 weeks, feeding on anything in the Rosaceae family. So those are the roses, grapes, if you have grapes, and if you're growing grapes like for grape leaves to eat the grapes, to eat the grape leaves, don't use a systemic. Use one of the Earth Friendly Natural products from Bonide. And anytime you see that tan color on the label, then it's an Earth Friendly Natural. And this is an organically derived pyrethrin. Again, use it in an earth friendly manner late in the evening, so you're not going to kill any of the pollinators, just the Japanese beetles. And you do have to spray it on their body for it to work. And or if they walk across it when it's wet, then it works. And the Japanese beetles, they just stay on the plants all the time, so you'll be able to take care of them. If you have a lot to spray, you can use the same formula is in the fruit and nut orchard spray, and it's in a ready to spray applicator. This hooks to your hose, and then you can either use it in a fan spray or a stream spray. So we've got great tools, to keep all your plants, safe and sound. But be on the lookout for the Japanese beetles, because they're going to be emerging pretty soon. And if you live close to a golf course or have large lawn areas, there's a good chance you're going to see a lot of Japanese beetles. Don't put the traps up, because they're baited with a pheromone that will attract more Japanese beetles to your property than you ever want to have there. So don't use them in your property. If you have a neighbor you don't like, give it to them, but don't use those, because you end up having more Japanese beetles than you ever would want to have. Okay, so kind of be aware of that. Okay, now I'm going to show you the Rocky Horror Picture Show, or the samples of all the samples have been coming in. We're getting in the Plant Information Center here at Chalet, and that's the new way to bring samples in. I used to have, my microscope is still there, but because of COVID, we've closed the nursery office and opened it up as the information center. And then you come to the back side, there's window number 1 and window number 2, and you bring your samples and your questions to us, and then we answer them. I can still run to my microscope if I need it, and then come back. But look what we're getting. Okay. These are all types of anthracnose, and these are fungal leaf spot diseases that I think every plant out there in the landscape has gotten it. And it was because we warmed up in April. Remember, we got to wear shorts in April? We warmed up in April, and then it got rainy, and then it got really rainy in May for that one weekend. We had that 8 inches, but because it warmed up, all of the spore awoke and was released. And then it cooled back down. So it was like keeping it in a refrigerator. So the spore lasted longer, longer, longer. And then we had on and off rain so that the leaf surfaces stayed moist. This is a classic example. This is Boston ivy, and you can see the leaf spots on it. And the Boston ivy, this actually was a good leaf. It looks really good. But when you put this under the microscope, you can see how it was just getting ready to produce more spores. Then it got hot. Then we got really hot in June, you know, the 85s and the 90s, and that just halted it, which is so cool because that's keeping any secondary reinfection. But so when the spots are looking like this, that's because it got inoculated before this waxy leaf surface formed. And then it took 6 to 8 weeks. And then when all these spots really popped up was when it was so hot. When our plants were drought stressed, they said, I can't keep this hidden anymore. So they all popped up. So that's the parthenocissus. Now, this one really looks bad. This is a climbing hydrangea. And look, oh my gosh. But the cool thing is you can tell it was a leaf that was one of the first ones to form. Oop, it just dropped off. First one to form. And then these were the younger leaves. And you can tell how the waxy cuticle formed before the inoculum landed on it. So it's not so bad. So usually it's just the older leaves or the leaves that first formed that are showing all this. Now, if anybody has a maple, most people are horrified by what their maples look like. This is a very dried leaf, but this is an autumn blaze maple. And see that's all the anthracnose. And you can see how it landed kind of in where the veins were. So it's where the water was collected. And then that's where the inoculum got into the leaf. And then it showed up. Now, people are just panicked about why their maples look like this. But it's been about 4 weeks since the disease really popped up and started showing up. And the nice thing is on the outer ends of the branches, the leaves are forming normally. And when you walk away from the tree and look at it from a distance and you see the canopy, it looks really good from a distance. The only time you see these leaf spots is when you walk and look up under the canopy. This is kind of a bad joke, but I say it's like looking up a woman's skirt. You don't want to do that. You know, just look out the outer and it's not going to hurt the plants. I've said this before. This is like having a teenage kid having acne. And you know, when they have it, they think they're going to die because it looks so bad and they feel so bad when they look in the mirror, but it doesn't hurt them at all. And it's the same thing with most of these plants. It's not going to hurt them at all. And, you know, it doesn't go into the wood. Now, with one exception, Japanese maples, it can go into the wood and then you get a dieback look. So when you're dealing with Japanese maples, use a good fungicide like Immunox. This is one of our favorites. Immunox, again, is a systemic fungicide. You spray it on and it can rain that night, but it stays in the leaves that were sprayed and it will translocate from the leaf into the wood, the woody branches. And if the fungus is in there, it'll stop it. It'll stop it. Now I have to show you a couple more. Ooh, this one just came in today. This is a horse. This is a chestnut. It's not a horse chestnut. This is just it's just great. It's a huge tree. It's a chestnut, and it just got slammed with this. And this is not anthracnose. I love the name of this one. It's called Guignardia. Guigu. Guignardia, Guignardia. And you can see this is not a variegated plant. This is all disease. And when you look at the back side, you can see how it's sporulating, but then it dried up. So it stopped, and you know, but these leaves don't look good at all, and a lot of them actually have dried up like this. You know, that looks like it. So a lot of people are really worried about them, but don't worry, they'll be fine. This is such a large tree that we don't ever even recommend anything to take care of it. I mean, these trees are beautiful, large trees. They're about 75 feet. This one on this gentleman's property was 75 feet. And, you know, that's just what they get, Guignardia. I love the names. I love the names. Now, rust is also showing up. Now, rust is a warm season disease. We're seeing it on roses. We're seeing it on hollyhocks. And this is really cool. Now, I'm not taking it out of the plastic bag because this is a service berry. Oh, good, it shows pretty well. See the leaves? The leaves didn't get it because they were more mature when the spore was out. But as the fruit was formed, see how it inoculated the fruit? And then what happens is it gets these, these are teliospores, and they're like structures that grow out of the fruit. And you can see the orange dust in the bag. That's the spore being released. And then this goes back. This is a dual host disease. It goes back and forth between eastern red cedar and, or juniper. It's a juniper virginicus or geniata, and back and forth between the two plants. The birds and the chipmunks are going to eat these off the tree, and they even eat the diseased ones right here. So don't worry about it. They're going to get rid of all the evidence. But if you don't want this to happen to your serviceberry, spray with Immunox next spring, or use that drench. Although this is proof about how wonderful these drenches are. They're not taken into the fruit, and they're not in the flowers either. So the insecticide or the fungicide they're not in the fruit or the flowers. So you're gonna see that if we have a year, and all these diseases are really geared around temperature and moisture levels, and we just had a perfect condition for all of these fungal leaf spot diseases this year. So that's kind of the bad news. Now, a little more bad news. The insects that we're seeing, tons of insects. Okay, so leaf beetles on viburnums. I've talked about that before in the garden coach. Right now we're at that midway point where all the larvae of the viburnum leaf beetles have finished feeding, they've dropped to the ground, and they've pupated, they burrowed into the ground and pupated. And so then they'll be as dormant pupa for another 6 to 8 weeks, again, depending on temperature. And then they'll emerge as adults and attack the viburnums all over again. So now is the time to really treat your viburnums with the systemic drench insecticide, and that's the tree and shrub from BioAdvanced, or the tree and shrub annual 12-month insecticide from Bonide. And you mix that based on the height of the shrub, and it's 3 ounces per foot of plant height in a gallon of water, and pour it right where the trunk goes into the ground. And then that's taken up and protects that plant for a full year. So this is the perfect time to treat them, because it's going to be in the plant when the adults come back out in another month and a half. And then it'll also be in the plant tissue when the new leaves form next spring. And if eggs are laid on the plants and those larvae hatch, they'll start feeding, and it will kill them and stop that life cycle. So if you have viburnums, you really need to treat. And it just breaks my heart that the viburnums have fallen prey to the viburnum leaf beetle. Okay, rose slugs. Rose slugs are what make the roses look like the glass, the stained glass. The leaves look like stained glass because those little green larvae scrape the tissues off the backside of the leaf, and then it looks like stained glass, windows. And so again, using the systemic insecticides. And the bad news is we used to always deal with just the regular rose slug, and it had one life cycle a year. The softfly adults would emerge in early May, lay the eggs, the larva would feed, they would drop down to the ground and pupate and stay there all summer and all winter for a whole year. And so there was one life cycle. Well, the cousin moved into town, and it's called the bristly rose slug. And you really can hardly tell the difference between the two unless you have them under a microscope. And the problem is the bristly rose slug has 4 to 5 life cycles. So they just keep coming back and coming back and coming back. So treat with that systemic insecticide to protect your roses. Okay. All right. Then I talked about Japanese beetles. I had my warning notes here. So what you should be doing, out in your lawn right now, spraying to protect from fungal problems and insects. And July 1st is the best time to fertilize trees and shrubs, fruit trees, flowering and fruiting shrubs, hydrangeas. If you really want to make sure your hydrangeas are looking good, because they are the late summer bloomers. So, use that fertilizer. My favorite is the Dr. Earth. It's called the Bud and Bloom Booster, and it lasts for 60 days. So if you can get that application down, it'll be this weekend. It'll be the 29th. This is the 25th. So coming up on this weekend, or next week, get that fertilizer on everything. Anything that needs to be fertilized, get it down, and that's when it's going to use it the most, produce the most flowers, and really get a good benefit, and your plants will get a good benefit out of that. Okay, now the other thing, even though, we're getting these little thunder boomers, I checked my rain gauge this morning, and all these rain flashes we've had from last weekend until today, I only had 3/4 of an inch of rain. So that in my book, it doesn't count. I mean, it does, but our plants need at 80 degrees, 85 degrees, we need to be getting 1.5 inches of rain a week. So make sure you've got your sprinklers ready to use to really soak those trees and shrubs and roses and in your vegetable garden especially. Make sure you keep everything well watered, and hostas too. Hostas really need the water, and to keep them happy. They're shade tolerant, but man, they love water. Keep them well watered. Okay. Now, let me check the time. It's 1:20. I've got a couple other things that I want to mention, and then I'm going to answer everyone's questions. And I don't have as many as we have had, but this way I'll be able to give them a lot of attention. Okay. All right. So now, if you haven't, be cautious about trying to get rid of any weeds in the lawn right now, because our temperatures can go over 85 in the next 30 days. So be cautious about using any of the herbicides, because they can really volatilize, especially anything that has a 2,4-D in it. Those chemicals will volatilize, and they're plant hormones, and they'll drift into the actively growing trees and shrubs and other plants, especially tomatoes in your garden. Once I get my tomatoes in, I don't ever do any weed killing, because it will really impact. Tomatoes are like the canary in the coal mine when it comes to weed killer. And if any of those fumes drift into them, they all twist up and really damages the tomatoes, and you don't get your harvest isn't as good. So kind of just get resolved to say, okay, I'm going to live with these weeds until August 15th, and between August 15th and September 15th, and then really go after them then. Okay. All right. The next thing. Oh, how many people have seen slugs? They've awakened, and I'm seeing holes on my hosta. So so make sure you've got your slug bait out, and it's one of the best things. And Sluggo, I'm leaning way too close here because I've got to reach over and get this. Sluggo is the earth-friendly natural form of slug bait or slug killer, and it has iron phosphate in it, and you sprinkle this at 1 teaspoon every 3 square feet. It's not a lot. This whole pound, this is 1.25 pounds. No, this is 1 pound. 1 pound jar will cover 1,000 square feet. So I like to sprinkle this every 2 weeks. And then the slugs are attracted to it. They eat it. The iron phosphate that's embedded in these little particles actually kill their appetite, and then they stop feeding. The damage stops, and then they crawl away and die someplace because they stop eating. So this is one of the best ones, the best ones. I know I show this to you all the time, but I want you to make sure you understand that label right there, Neudorf. See the sunflower and the name? That's the company in Germany that does all the research on the earth-friendly natural chemicals, and they invented the iron phosphate years and years ago. We've been using Sluggo gosh, it's really scary when I say how many years ago things are. I think it's probably been 15 years that we've had Sluggo, but but that's always scary when I start talking about how many years it's been. Okay, all right. Oh, more diseases. I just want to. We're seeing a lot of black knot on cherry still. People really notice those knots that are on there. And then I mentioned the anthracnose. Anthracnose is everywhere. Oh my gosh, I've seen probably more fungal leaf diseases this year than I've seen in the last 5 years, because we warmed up, and so we're seeing all the good guys. One thing that I'm sure we're going to see on the maples is the tar spot, and that should start showing up in probably another 3 weeks. So kind of be on the lookout for that. All right, so now let's get to the questions. Oh, here we go, and I'm seeing some from the panelists. Oh, this is neat. So I think this is Donna. I think I have this one from yeah, I do. It's Donna Dow. And can I prune or deadhead my salvia and get a second flowering? And so that was one of the questions I had already, and you put it on the chat box. I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, yes, you can. The salvias are just, you can tell when it's time to prune the salvias, because what happens, they have these beautiful long spikes. They're probably about 8 to 9 inches long. And they start blooming from the bottom and then just keep blooming. You get the full spike, and then the flowers fade from the base of the spike up to the top. And so when you only have about a ½ inch of flower spike left, on it, that's the signal that you want to bundle them all together. And what I do is I take my bundles of my perennial salvia, and I tie them together. I tie them together at about 6 inches from the ground, and then also about 8 inches from the ground, and then just cut all those flowering spikes off. And what's nice is they're tied together, so you don't have to gather and hunt them to put them in the yard waste bag or your compost bin. And so then water heavily and fertilize. Give them fertilize. Remember I said use a July 1st fertilizer. Give them some fertilizer. And again, the Dr. Earth Bud and Bloom Booster is perfect for the salvias. And in 4 to 6 weeks, they'll be back in bloom again, and they'll bloom another 8 to 10 weeks till the end of the season. They're so fun, and it's so rewarding. It's one of the best perennials that you can have in your garden. Okay, so now this is another one from Patty. And gardening in pots. What are the best vegetables or herbs, to grow in pots? And what I like are the dwarf varieties. And unfortunately, we're sold out of all the seeds. Renee's Garden has a whole collection of vegetables and herbs that are on her label. It shows them in containers, and so they're perfect. They're a perfect reduced size for containers. Now, if you're working with tomato plants, and you don't have the dwarf ones, and the dwarf is a new group that was hybridized to grow and produce tomatoes, and they're not great big tomatoes, but you can get some of the dwarfs that have like a 2-inch diameter tomato, which is a good slicing tomato. It's great for sandwiches, and they can grow and produce in a pot as small as 10 inches in diameter. Those are the dwarf varieties. But if you don't have access to the dwarfs, and they were hard to get this year, and I wish I could explain why. I think people were just scared because of the COVID, didn't put a lot of production in place. But if you go with the determinate types, and what's nice is that they grow to a certain height, stop, and then technically the harvest comes, ripen close to the same time. When you're gardening up here in the north, the northern hardiness zones, they just kind of keep producing and producing and producing. But anything that's small like that are perfect in your containers. Smaller peppers are great; they're excellent. And then, excuse me, I wouldn't do things like zucchini unless it's a dwarf variety or squash, because they tend to run out of the container. But peppers and tomatoes and herbs are perfect for containers. And great question, really good question. Okay, so now the next one, I don't have, oh, it's Jill. It's Jill. And trees, spraying and trimming, what is right for each one? That's a pretty broad question. But when you're talking about things like crab apples, then spraying and trimming those. You want most of the pruning you want to do in March before the new growth starts, because and or anything that's a flowering tree, if it blooms in the spring, then you want to prune them within 6 to 8 weeks after they finish blooming, because they'll start producing their flower buds for next year at that 8-week point. So you want to get all of that pruning done before July 15th. So you still have you have 3 weeks right now. Well, maybe it's more like 2 weeks, but you still have time to get those things pruned. And that's also true for things like, these aren't trees, but the lilacs, the lilacs and the larger shrub type, lilacs, that it's good to get those pruned by then. Now, there are groups of trees that you never want to prune right now. You don't want to prune oaks. You don't want to prune elms. And the reason for that is that if you do, you have open wounds, open sap that could be oozing, and that will attract insects. And those are the insects that vector, the diseases. So like the Dutch elm disease and some of the elm diseases, and oak wilt. You really don't want to mess with that. So save any of that pruning for the off season. So that's after October, in between October and March, to do pruning for those large trees. Spraying, usually the spraying is done early in the season. So that would mean starting in April. You can do a dormant spray with copper, copper octanoate, copper soap, in March. And that kills a lot of the overwintering spore and also any overwintering insect eggs that would be on the bark of the trees. And then you also use that copper spray as the new growth is starting to emerge. And that's really good for fire blight. We have had a lot of fire blight, especially this year, because we warmed up and we were wet, and warm and wet. Warm is over 60 degrees, over 60, 65 degrees, between 60 and 80. And that's what we were dealing with in April and May this year. And what happens is fire blight is a systemic disease that stays in the trees and shrubs where it's been inoculated. It gets in through the flowers. So when the flowers open, that fire blight gets in. It's splashed in when it's raining. Insects actually move it. So our pollinators that are helping us get our fruit crops are also spreading that disease, the fire blight. And then what happens is it clogs the vascular system, and then the bacteria replicates and then runs down the branch, and you get all of these dead branches with the tips that are kind of cooked over, and it looks like a fire. It looks like a fire has blasted through, because it's dark brown or almost black. So if you're seeing any of that on your trees, your crab apples, pears, and apples, right now, this is the time of year to prune that out. And you do it on a dry day. Last week was great when it was just nice and dry, and you could get in and prune all that out. That gets rid of the source of the disease for next year. And then you'll want to spray the tree next March, and also April, with a copper spray. I mean, copper takes care of bacteria and fungus, so that's why copper is so good. It takes care of that. So that was a great question about trimming and spraying. Oh, I want to mention about trimming trees. There's really only one reason to prune a tree, is if it's too large for the area where it was planted. But number one and number two, if there's any diseased wood on it or any broken branches on it, that's a number one reason to prune. Other than that, you really shouldn't have to prune unless you do have a lot of growing out over like driveways or sidewalks or things like that. And usually that means it was planted in the wrong location. And the problem with it being planted in the wrong location is that no one ever wants to take over ownership for it. So I give people an out by saying, yeah, it was planted that way when you moved into the house. You know, and I have a tree like that in my own house. I would have never planted it where it was planted, but the former owner did that. You know, no, I'm not laughing about that. They really did. But so whenever you do need to prune, you know, you can do that. Now, another reason, the first two reasons, dead wood, diseased wood, and, you know, or broken branches, and then the other are any they're called water sprouts or suckering, and suckers are sprouts that are formed from the root down from the ground, and then the water sprouts, if you have horizontal branches and buds get activated and the branch grows straight up, it has the problem of crossing other branches, so you would prune those out as well. But that technically should be done during the off season, especially on the trees I talked about. But like, you can get by with it on apples and crab apples right now if you want to prune some of those water sprouts. But good question, very good question. Okay, I've got another one here, and oh, this was an interesting question, and this is from Linda. And she said, what should you use in the soil to get rid of the Japanese beetle larva, or the grubs? We call those grubs. And the best one, and you can still do it now, but you're not going to get rid of the grubs that are there right now. Those are pupated, and those will be emerging as adults really soon. But GrubX is one of the best products, and it's newer. It's been, I think it's 6 years now that they came out with this new formula, and the active ingredient is called chlorantranilipril, and it actually works on the calcium ports in the muscles of the grubs, and it's labeled for 5 insects only. It doesn't kill anything else. It doesn't work on the neurotransmitters, which is the nervous system of the insects. It works on those calcium ports, and so GrubX is the one that has it. It is so safe to use out in the environment. It doesn't even have a warning label on it. So most of insecticides and fungicides and herbicides at least have, there's three labels. There's caution, warning, and danger, and those are the 3 levels of warning on, for pesticides. And even coffee can have a warning label on it, if you drink too much coffee. But and baby shampoo, So always watch that. But that GrubX is great. You can still put it down now. If you wait until you're seeing grubs. Now, what happens are the Japanese beetles emerge as adults this week. They feed, they mate, then they lay more new eggs in the lawn that will hatch, and that will create the grub problem in July and August, going forward. And this year, because they're emerging, as early as they are, we'll see grub damage at the time we're used to seeing it, and that's at the end of July, going in through August. We've had such cold, wet springs in the last 5 years that it made the emergence of the Japanese beetles extremely late. And so we weren't seeing grub damage until September, even into October, over the last 5 years. This year, they're going to be on schedule. I don't know if that's good news or bad news, but anyway. So look for GrubX. Now, if you wait until you're seeing the grub damage in August, you have to use it's a 24-hour kill grub control, and it's called grub control, and that's from Bonite or Espoma, and that active ingredient is called Dilox, and it will kill the grubs within 24 hours, and it only lasts in the soil for 5 days. The regular GrubX, the GrubX from Scott's company, it will last in the soil. You could have used it as early as April, and it would stay in the soil from April all the way through to December. So that's another reason it's a really good product to use. And you still have time to use it now. So that's great. I'm not seeing any more questions on the chat page. I'm looking at the time. It's 20 minutes until 2, and I was going to look through some of my other notes to see if I can share anything else with you. And let me see. Last week, here's looks like another question. We've got 12 people. Thank you all for joining. Again, one of the things, and I noticed on the notes here, one of the things I'm seeing, a lot of people are having drought stress and drought problems on their plants because of how dry it was in early June, and also how hot it was. And so we're seeing damaged leaves on the hydrangeas, Japanese maples. I've had 5 samples in the last 3 days of Japanese maples that were just planted that have all the around all the edges of all the newest leaves out at the tip. They're all browned out, and that's just because they got too dry in between waterings. If you have newly planted things, treat them like intensive care patients. And when we're talking about intensive care patients, that means you need to water, treat them like they're still in a container, and water them every other day when they're in the ground. You don't want to water every day because you're never going to have any oxygen in the air spaces of the soil. So water one day, wait a day, water another day, but water every other day for those first 6 weeks they're in the ground. And that's how long it takes for those roots to move from the root ball into the surrounding soil. Here's another question that popped up. And Donna says, I want to plant under the roof eaves on the northwest side of my house. It gets very little rain and afternoon sun. Recommendations, grasses, hostas. I don't think I would do hostas, just because hostas like a lot of rain, a lot of water. Ornamental grasses would be wonderful, because they would get the afternoon sun, and they can hold up. You have to treat them again like an intensive care patient when you first plant them. You want to keep them watered well for the first 6 to 8 weeks, and then after that, after they get their roots established in the surrounding soil, they can tolerate, if it gets a little rain. But make sure you give them a good soaking once a week, and because it's under that eave, so it doesn't get the rain when it does come. So just put that on your to-do list that you need to water those plants at least once a week. Some of the sedges would be really neat in that area because it looks like it's afternoon sun. I would love to know how many hours of afternoon sun, because if the sun comes over this way and there's no blockage, it can be pretty intense sun. So if that's the case, stick with the standard ornamental grasses. I love the panicums. Those are the prairie switch grasses. They're just lovely. They're absolutely lovely. And north wind is one of my favorites. And there's just all kinds of gorgeous. And our plants look beautiful. We've gotten so many gorgeous perennials out in the nursery, out in the sales yard. And that June is planting perennials month, because our soil is finally warm. And so once you get those perennials planted, the roots will grow in quickly. Keep them well watered. I always talked about everybody about using a product called Root and Grow. We ran out of Root and Grow, and the company ran out of Root and Grow. So guess what? Our buyers found another one, and it's just called Root Stimulator from a company called Fertilome. So we'll be getting that one back in, and use that every 2 weeks when you've planted something new, because it has the rooting hormone and it has a 4-10-3 fertilizer component. It has that high phosphorus, which is the nutrient for root developments. So those are going to be those that make sure you really baby those plants as they're just getting started, and they're really good. Now again, watch your hostas. Make sure you keep them well watered too, because they love, and it was interesting when I first learned about hostas, back when I was a student and an intern at Longwood Gardens, they were always planted right along the small lake sides, and hostas and astilbes. They like that a moister area. So keep them really well watered. Really well watered. I'm going through my head of all the other things that we're seeing. Yeah, I think we got it. You don't have to do anything for the lawn again until, if you did that Memorial Day into the first 2 weeks of June, the fertilizer application, then you don't have to do anything for the lawn until the 15th of August, which is, and going into Labor Day. So, and you should see the lawns are looking pretty good. They really thickened up when our temperatures warmed up, and they look really good out there. So, let me see, it's quarter till. I still have 12 people. Oh, you know what? Here's another question answer screen. Let me pop this up and see if I've got them all. I have rust on my crab trees. Is there anything I can do now? This is for Jane. And no, Jane, right now, there's not anything you can do for the rust on the crab trees. Just keep them well watered, give them some fertilizer, that will help them, do better. And then next spring, you want to spray with a systemic fungicide like Immunox or the all-in-one to prevent from getting the inoculation. Okay, Alini, or I think it's Alini, or yeah, Alini. Hi, Jennifer. Alini and Karen here from Hicks Nursery in New York. Oh my God, you guys, hi. It's so good oh my gosh, it's so good to hear from you. What great, how much fun. That is great. I have good friends all over the country, everybody. So it's so nice to hear from you at Hicks Nursery. Wow, that was fun. Okay, so if there's no more questions, I think we're getting, let me see, it's 1:46. I'm gonna put the call out, last call for questions. If you have any other questions, I'll hang around for another 5 minutes. And then if not, be sure and come and visit us at the Plant Information Center. And I was advised today that I need to put a sign up. We have, the plexiglass spacing things to keep us socially distanced. I have one at my microscope table, and I need to get a sign up on there because people are used to bringing their samples to my microscope, but we're actually in that plant health, the Plant Information Center right now. So if you have other questions, we have our customer call center. And so the easiest way to get a question here, we've got, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we have 8 people handling those calls and handling the emails. And then they're sending them to the people that have the knowledge, for that. But the best way to do it is just send a question to help@chaleznursery.com, and that goes to our customer call center, and you'll get an answer really quick. We've finally gotten things kind of settled in dealing with the COVID situation, and our systems are really starting to work. So we're hoping that everybody is safe and sound out there. Oh, thank you for the great info. Keep up the great work. Thank you for your compliment, Marion. That is so nice. That is so nice. So yeah, now that we're going into phase 4, boy, be safe, everyone. And don't forget your hand sanitizer. Look at my cute new face mask that I got. It's really fun. And this has got, doesn't this look like a good one for a horticulturist? See my cute little violets, and it kind of goes with my coloring, doesn't it? So I won't put that on until I keep going here, but all right, everybody, it's 10 till 2, and thank you for all sending your questions. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next week. Well, we're doing this every week, so send your questions in, and I'll keep you up to date on what we're seeing and what you need to do next. And this is signing out, Jennifer as the garden coach. All right, thank you all. Bye-bye now.